Is CoE for Dynamics 365 stalled? There will be no better person to answer that than Antti.
So let's give the too long didn't read first.
I know of an organization that ended up with 5,000 power apps very quickly because they're watching YouTube videos and started creating power apps to do stuff and all sorts of things, and they just went a little bit crazy.
How do we test our agents? How do we provide access to business stakeholders to understand what the agent's doing? Is it hallucinating or is it giving proper answers?
I think for adoption, as with anything, they say you can manage what you measure, and you need to have a tool.
When would you say is the right time for the Center of Excellence to be introduced? Do I really need to have all of this overhead? Is there a easy way to identify when you need to introduce it?
We will start today with our free public service. We take a question from Reddit. And the question is very simple. Is CoE for Dynamics 365 stalled? And there will be no better person to answer that than Antti. We'll try to chime in.
So let's give the too long didn't read first. No.
Okay, that's good news.
Then the broader answer. Yeah, so the CoE, the Center of Excellence Starter Kit, that's built by Microsoft's PowerCat team, which is Microsoft's I believe it's customer advocacy team. They help the biggest enterprise customers with adoption and whatnot. It is built by them. It was first coined several years ago, probably 4 or 5 years ago or something. And we've had all sorts of rumors around that product, I want to say the past 9 months to a year. And that has to do with two different things. First off, the team, the people behind the CoE starter kit changed slightly. So there was a bit of uncertainty where that's going, even though it wasn't that visible for your regular user. That still caused a bit of uncertainty. And then communications are the other reason. Perhaps Microsoft didn't do the best job in communicating the future of the Center of Excellence Starter Kit. But where it's going is it's seeing bug fixes. It is seeing development in the sense that Microsoft is kind of keeping it up to date, fixing bugs, making sure it works for organizations. Then they're not doing a lot of new development work. So its future isn't, it's not set in stone, and it's not seeing as much new stuff as it did 1 or 1.5 years ago, but it is still a very important tool for governing the platform. That's one of the first things that I do when I have a new engagement with a customer where we talk governance and establish governance guardrails and frameworks. One of the first things we do is we analyze what the customer has. We use the CoE for that together with Microsoft's Copilot Studio Kit for agents. So it is definitely a valid tool to still use today, and I doubt it's going anywhere anytime soon, not in the short term. I don't have a crystal ball, but I highly doubt it's going anywhere.
How Copilot going to affect that?
We don't really have a CoE for Copilot. The CoE Starter Kit has some information, mostly telemetry on agents. It's fairly limited in that sense. But then again, Microsoft's PowerCat has what's called Copilot Studio Kit, which then allows us to see more in-depth to our agents in our tenant before we have a good list in Power Platform Admin Center for a more homogeneous view. So it does give us an inventory of our agents. It gives us some testing capabilities, some basic dashboards, KPIs, metrics, and so on and so on. It's not really a CoE tool, but it is something that when we start talking about agents with customers, it's one of the first things I do put in place so that we at least have something more than the pretty much non-existent current tools that the platform natively offers for any kind of analytics.
I've got a question for Antti. When would you say is the right time for the Center of Excellence to be introduced? Because a lot of people say, well, I've got Power Platform Admin Center, there's lots of things in there, it keeps evolving. Do I really need to have all of this overhead that the Center of Excellence is going to bring me? When is the right time? Is there a certain size of organization that needs a Center of Excellence that the Center of Excellence is best for, or a certain number of environments after which you need the Center of Excellence? Is there a easy way to identify when you need to introduce it?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, I would put it in place for any medium plus sized organizations. Anything that's medium plus, not to mention obviously big organizations, they do need it. Small businesses, maybe maybe not worth it if you have a couple of employees. It doesn't really give you anything extra. But say you have 100, 200 employees potentially building something, why not put it in place? I mean, obviously it has a learning curve, so that's always one thing. Like, do you want to put it in place yourself, spend a couple of days figuring it out and put it in place? Do you want a smaller partner? If you're a smaller organization, do you want a smaller partner to put it in place? It is still going to be a couple of days with all the initial setup, with accounts and licenses and all that kind of stuff. Through all that, I'd say maybe not for small organizations, but medium-sized and large organizations, definitely. If you're using Power Platform, and you are using Power Platform. If you're using the Microsoft ecosystem, you're using Power Platform because everyone can build everyone can build apps and automations as long as they use Outlook and they use OneDrive. They can SharePoint, Excel. They can build apps and flows. Put CoE in place to understand what's happening in your tenant.
Can I throw a little spanner in as well and ask Antti, Center of Excellence versus managed environments? Discuss.
Yeah, free or pay to play. Yeah, so I mean, managed environments, it's gone a long way in the past couple of years from where it started. It is still not a complete means of governing the platform. Neither is the CoE. You can't do everything with the CoE. You can't do everything with managed environments. So I would say they complement each other. They're not mutually inclusive or mutually exclusive. You kind of you need them both. You need them both.
What the idea was behind CoE and everything, basically behind Power Platform, every single person will build themselves an app. It's army of citizen developers, which now pretty much about the same story and the same narrative is about agents. So how much have you seen in the field that organizations let people actually pick up and build their own Power Automate, their Power Apps, Canvas apps, whatever? Because usually the reason why I don't see sometimes in customers using CoE because they restrict any citizen development motion going on in the company. IT owns it, goodbye.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can, without knowing what is on your platform, you can't really restrict it. You think you can, but you really don't because you always have technical debt. The way the platform always works is people start building things. Then IT thinks, hey, we need to do something. And then they do something. However, there is a bunch of technical debt that they most likely are unaware of. And then they've, kind of closed the gaps. They have their DLPs and whatnot, but they might not know what's actually in place on the platform. And that's what the CoE is for, understanding what is happening on your platform. What is that level of technical debt? And what is the risk of that technical debt? For me, that's one of the primary drivers. And after that, when you have those things in place, that's when it comes in through proactive or reactive monitoring and analytics and governance. But the starting point is understanding how much in a world of hurt are you with your existing sit dev build solutions.
And who has access to do what? Because I think you can...
And who has access to what, yeah.
I think that I know of an organization that ended up with 5,000 Power Apps very quickly because they gave people access to do it and they started, and to their credit, very creative, very engaged workforce. They all started watching YouTube videos and started creating Power Apps to do stuff and all sorts of things. And they just went a little bit crazy. And a lot of them are likely dormant, never been used and never went anywhere. But I think it's a case of you don't want to restrict people from creating things, but at the same time, you need them to be aware of what they're doing, and there needs to be some approval process. Otherwise, you end up with 5,000 Power Apps, and then you have to figure out what is what. And you need to have some level of control, I think. But it's the whole question around how much do you restrict versus how much do you allow people to create the tools that they need.
And I think that's maybe turning the question around a bit, not trying to answer how many people do we have building solutions. One thing that I think is easier to generalize is that in the enterprise landscape, I think it's pretty safe to say that you're going to have thousands, if not tens of thousands of apps and automations. So there's going to be if you're an enterprise organization, you will have lots of apps and automations. Is 5,000 or 50,000 a lot? Then that's in the eye of the beholder. But I think it's a bit of an easier question to give a number to than how many John Does and Jane Does we have out there actually creating them.
CoE, Center of Excellence, I'm sure it will explode. It will be the number one product everyone is using when Copilot and agents will be actually in the mainstream. Because if I think with Power Apps, there was a huge uptick for people to become developers. But now with AI, you'll need to use maybe not the similar, but similar kind of tool just to see what's going on there. And that will be, I think, fundamental. Arita, you don't agree?
I don't know whether it will be a CoE style thing. I think it's more likely that you would have something a bit more enterprise grade, because with the difference for me with the agentic world of the future and agents doing stuff is the fact that they are doing stuff. It's one thing to have a power app that sits there and maybe does something very limited. With agents, the potential for disruption is humongous, right? And I think I don't think it's going to be optional to have a center of excellence. Well, the governance part, right? There's not called a center of excellence. You would need to have an AI control and command center by default, because you can't have rogue agents in your organization. So you will need that. I don't think it will be an optional thing, because at the moment the center of excellence is an optional thing. If you want to have chaos, so be it, have chaos, right? I don't think that's something in the future that will be allowed. I would be very surprised if it is, because you can effectively end up with rogue IT by default, which is, I'm not really sure Microsoft as a vendor would be happy with that. They will have to protect their customers from themselves somehow.
Yeah, the AI world has a lot of, especially the custom agent, the Copilot world, has a lot of space for improvement on governance and monitoring. And if we quickly look at a couple of things that I think are missing on the platform today, most likely because we just haven't, or Microsoft just hasn't had the time to get there yet. How do we analyze our conversations as business stakeholders? How do we understand what the agent is doing? Our testing capabilities. How do we test our agents? We don't really have any testing capabilities in our custom agents beyond the Copilot Studio Kit. How do we provide access to business stakeholders to understand what the agent's doing? Is it hallucinating or is it giving proper answers? How do we kind of keep up to speed with what is the actual tangible value of that agent? So I think we still have a lot of questions that are unanswered on these fronts, and probably they will be addressed over time, but naturally they're actually some of them things that are, I don't want to say blocking implementation, but they are consistent headaches in agent implementations these days.
I'm sure we'll have to have an episode just about agents delivery, and it will be a funny one because it will have to be retired, I'm sure, by the moment we need to publish it, or maybe in a month. It's one of those which would have very short shelf life. CoE, I think, is one of the most underrated tool in the platform, and many companies don't even know about the existence, and they maybe heard the word and they not even can translate what's going on there.
The only thing I will say about CoE is that it's a great tool. However, my issue with it is that it asks a lot from organizations. And what I mean by that is you need time to get up to speed with it. You need a separate environment for it to run in and do its thing. You can't control what it does. It's kind of an all or nothing approach that the CoE takes. And the updates and keeping it up to date, it almost feels to organizations a lot of the time that they need to have a person purely responsible for CoE to make sure that the CoE is kept up to date, it's running, it's doing its thing. And I think that's not a bad call, in the sense that if you want to get the most out of it and have it make a difference, you can't just stick it in and leave it there, because then it's not going to be useful to your organization. So I think that's the only thing for me. The CoE is very valuable, but there is considerable investment needed, ongoing, frequent investment needed in it. It needs to be a conscious decision to have it as part of the stack. And that's where it differs, I think, from traditional admin centers and things like that, where it's there, it's ready for you, and you just go click around and have a look. The CoE isn't like that. It needs a lot of time and effort put into it, basically. I think that's my main kind of bear with it.
They should have added more. I know there is adoption toolkit just for, but if CoE had some bits of adoption stuff and the most important license management or kind of license suggestion, just based on what, that people will learn one bit, and obviously we'll learn the second one.
We just need the CoE agent that just goes and installs it, does all this. And I'm sure that's where we're going to end up, right? We're just going to have a little CoE agent that just goes away and does all the things that it needs to do. It creates the environment, sticks CoE in, comes back and goes, give me your parameters, I'll stick all of those in. And then goes, here you go, have a look. And then it just does it. I think in the future is very much geared towards that. And then there's going to be great value in that. So I think the problems that we're having with it right now are agents an answer?
Yeah, so yeah, I'm sure there is a long list of agents people want to add to yours, and they will definitely would like to replace all of us with solution architect agent, practice lead agent.
Yeah, our AI personas.
But I hear with you. So, Antti, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of want
Those
to tap.
feature requests.
I want to tap into the what I've already said, that it takes a lot to keep it up and running. It does, the CoE, and I want to say all the processes around it. Not just the tool, but the processes around it have to be part of a platform owner's job. You know, I don't know if you build the CoE around your job or your job around the CoE, probably depends on the person, but they go hand in hand. That's what I'm saying. And I think this is a great kind of segue to discussing, is Power Platform too much for an individual or a couple of individuals? What is the role of actual, application management services or continuous services on Power Platform? What's the need of mid-sized organizations and enterprise organizations? By the way, I always say mid-sized and enterprise because I have the most experience in that versus working with smaller companies. At what point is it required of an organization to actually outsource, for example, that monitoring work required by Power Platform versus you there as Mr. or Mrs. Platform owner doing it bi-weekly or once a month? That's opens up a whole different conversation and discussion to that angle.
So we finished with public service. Are you guys ready for Wheel of Fortune? So how the Wheel of Fortune works, some system selects a list of topics, and one of the person needs to be contrarian. So the role of that person would be to identify gaps in ideas of other speakers and maybe provide a summary. So let's see what will be our new challenge. Okay, adoption gap.
Ooh.
So, and contrarian here is Vlad. So I'll have to speak at the end. I'll have to identify gaps in other speakers' ideas. Do you remember a single story or any kind of bright moment of your life where you saw, you know what, if it wasn't for adoption, it will not fly, or it failed because adoption was bad?
Yeah. So again, back to agents, because that's pretty much what I've been working with the past 7, 8 months. Actually adopting those agents, that's new. It should be kind of like adopting software, but then for some reason it's not. What do people actually expect out of those agents versus what do they deliver? And I don't actually have good answers to that. I'm still learning that. I think a lot of us, a lot of us still are. They're not horror stories, but I have to say that that's something that I've been spending a bit of time considering. How can we make agent adoption a lot smoother, and what do we have to actually consider when we are going into our agent projects where we build agents or multiple agents? How much time do we give for testing? How do we actually build those test cases? Again, I don't really have any answers here. More pointing out things that I've seen where we can see that we're seeing some struggles.
How do you ensure that whatever you build, whatever you plan and design during your adoption planning, it's not something which intentionally done to derail the project? Because sometimes the person probably mentioned in one of the initial episodes, one of the person who might be assigned to manage the project might be actually the last person to get benefit out of it. And then in this case, adoption will be, I think it's failure by design in a way. So you have all these kind of good practices, what you just mentioned, but it's done with a wrong intention, how you can rule it out.
So I think realistically, it's all about involving enough people. If you involve all of the stakeholders that are actually stakeholders, and you're not limiting your stakeholders to a very small group you're not, as long as you're not excluding your stakeholders, and you understand why this is being implemented, and you make sure that all of your stakeholders understand why this is happening and what the benefit is. I think that's something that needs to be very clear. I think that if I think back on all the projects I have been involved in, the ones that have been the most successful, and I think we need to define what we mean by successful as well, because for different organizations, success of a IT project can mean different things. For me, a successful IT project is a project that has been delivered on time and on budget and the system is actually being used and it's delivering value for the organization and it's meeting the benefits that it was intending to. So there's return on investment, basically, overall. But some people just go, oh, well, we did the IT project, it was on time and on budget, and we've replaced the legacy system and it's great. They don't look at whether the system that's been implemented perhaps has made life worse for people. They're having to do manual processes that they weren't doing before because it's an MVP and they wanted to cut corners, and they've now created chaos in people's work that they didn't have to do before. All of these things have happened. I think what is very interesting is that generally change management has become a lot more important. And I think there is an acknowledgement that just creating a bit of software and giving people a bit of training and off they go doesn't really cut it anymore. I think there is an understanding of that, at least within people that do this all the time, whether organizations do, I don't know. But I have definitely seen a lot more involvement in the projects that I have been involved in over the years. It used to be the case that initially the only people you had involved were your stakeholder, your product owner, the project manager from the client side, the IT department. That was kind of all that you would liaise with, engage with. Maybe you would see some end users in some show and tells, but that was pretty much it. And they did the training internally. So you would create it with their IT team, and the IT team would train the people. So you never really knew after you delivered it and it went live and you went through hypercare. You never really knew what happened afterwards. You just don't know. Whereas now you have change managers, potentially official change management people involved very early on in the project. Or I've worked with a client that calls them organizational psychologists. Now, I don't know how I feel about that, but I'm intrigued by the change in title there. It is change management. As far as I can understand it, organizational psychology is change management. But the fact that we are seeing these changes and we are seeing these people involved in projects shows that there is this recognition that there needs to be a journey the end users are taken on, and different people will deal differently with change. And there needs to be a plan for each of the different types of people in the organization in order to make that project a success. So I think the fact that these things are coming along and we're having these conversations more and more, and we're seeing these people involved in projects more and more, is a good thing. The worst thing I think you can do is have a very small amount of people involved in the project, have a very small amount of people test it and UAT it that do not understand the extent to which the end users need to use the system. And then you go live and you're hit with thousands of queries and questions and problems because the system is being used by a massive user base that was not represented in the user stories in the testing, and then you have an absolute nightmare on your hands and a system that is universally hated. And it's very difficult to come back from that. And unfortunately, a lot of the time, that negative experience gets associated with the platform or the system itself, even though the reasons for the hatred may be nothing to do with actually the software and the way the software works. So it creates that long-term dislike. And that's not really the point of software. The point of software is to make our lives easier, not harder. And unfortunately, because of these things, it can actually have a reverse effect. So,
I think we have the success criteria. It's to be sure the system is not hated.
Yeah.
Hate is very common word when you hear about. It's not about love. Usually, it's how to prevent hatred. Let's give some bad advice.
What not to do? I mean, there's some easy top 5s there, right? So don't train them on it. Just set it. Just put it live. Don't include them in the requirements. So basically, create a system that doesn't help them in their job whatsoever. If anything, makes it harder. Make it difficult to use and understand. You actually need training on it, and then you don't get it. Too complicated, basically. Make it very complicated to use and understand.
I'll help you here just to add as many buttons as possible and bring all forms to a single, all fields to single form.
Yes, give it.
The fewer forms, fewer apps, the better.
Yes, lots of integrations, latency problems all over the place. Make it slow to create that. Make sure people are throwing their laptops out the window.
Uncommitted stakeholders and testers.
Yeah, don't test it. Yeah. Just don't test it. Just I'm sure it's fine. Yeah. Don't test it. And just make everyone system admin so that you don't have any access issues.
Yeah. In this case, everyone can sort out
Unfortunately,
their
that is
own
a true story. That is a painfully true story.
I agree.
Anyway.
No, in this case, you don't need any support. They can go and change whatever they want. They can publish any solution at any point of time too.
Yeah. Yeah. So to ensure that things fail, make sure that your testers are properly uncommitted, that they don't really care for for testing the system.
They just pass the tests
Part-
without
Just pass the
testing.
tests. The same would be stakeholders in general. Be sure that you don't understand the processes, what's actually being done in the solution, or the processes are way too complex. Maybe you're trying to solve something that's too complex in a simple by trying to oversimplify it too much, and it just doesn't work out.
Yeah, for me would be making sure that end users are not responsible for any data quality, and data quality is just owned by your IT department.
No, that's
It's
a
their
good
job
one.
to sort
Yeah.
out. Yeah. Again, I just a disclaimer: we're talking what not to do, because people can cut out of the context and say, these guys are saying this best practice, this how approach. No, it's worst practice. And take all the accountability from end users about the data, and then let them complain the data is not trustworthy. So that's why we're not using the system. So this is a couple of lists. So it's super hard to tell what to do. It's a long list what to do to make better adoption, but it's super easy to say how you can fail, and you'll be surprised how many people just actually take from the wrong list and implemented the system. Just a more serious matter, I think for adoption, as with anything, they say you can manage what you measure, and you need to have a tool. It could be adoption toolkit. There are a couple of third-party things which you can use to apply and see what's going on. We always, when there is a question of adoption, we always try to bring a tool just to see how the numbers look like. Usually when people are trying to understand who are their ambassadors or champions, product champions, they try to guess based on number of emails, number of complaints. So if you want to improve, try to measure. Because even if you have a program, and let's say you could sell to your executive team some funding for that adoption program, you need to be sure you can see a delta that's actually adoption going through the roof. And again, you need to have some numbers. So find the tool. There are plenty of third-party tools now, or go for adoption toolkit from Microsoft just to do that.
All very good points, Vlad. I think the only thing I would add to that is be careful what you measure, because what you measure is what you will get. Because I've seen situations where
true.
organizations are measuring the completely wrong things, and what you measure will drive people's behavior at the end of the day. So if you're
Give example what's good to measure.
So if well, actually, it's easier to tell you what is the wrong thing to measure. Think about what you're trying to actually get people to do. So, for example, if you are introducing a new CRM system, for example, and you're saying to your salespeople, whoever creates the most contacts in a month gets a bonus or whatever, you'll just get a load of crappy data in your system. What are you actually trying to achieve? Is it about quantity or is it about quality? It's trying to make sure that you're not actually creating behaviors that you weren't intending to, purely because of how you're incentivizing people. That's basically the gist of it. So think about what it actually means.
Be careful.
Yeah, be careful with what you're actually introducing incentives for, particularly when it comes to new projects.
Yeah, I mean, I've been working with the fact of having or not having champions on Power Platform in general for a short while now, and kind of the message that I have on champions is you kind of have to have a purpose for them as well. What makes a good champion for you is not necessarily what makes a good champion for another organization. I don't think there's a silver bullet in that, but I'm also seeing kind of like a desire to carve out and get those champions identified without actually understanding what those champions could bring in the table, what they would be like. What have you done for me lately? What can they do for you? They're not silver bullets to help you in your adoption if you don't really plan on how you're going to utilize them and get them to work in your favor for your user base.
Yeah, so for me to summarize, because it's my role, the Wheel of Fortune decided that, I can tell we need to be cognizant that adoption is a change management. So you might need to have some new roles. With adoption, you need to be sure you have testers. There are a lot of bad advice, which we probably listed quite a few. You know what, you can do even a health check. If you'll go and listen again to our podcast, and if you see a single item we put on a bad list you have in your practice, you'll be surprised you might have more than just one. That's actually a red flag. We were not joking. Those are red flags where you need to stop doing what you're doing and come back and try to do something else. You have no excuse. Or your boss or whatever who you want to blame on bad adoption, now you have a list to reference to.